The air in the corner office hummed with the quiet, predatory tension of a boardroom before a massacre. A single ray of afternoon sun cut across the polished obsidian desk, illuminating the fine dust motes dancing above a stack of quarterly reports. Chloe tapped her tablet pen against the edge of her iced Americano. The rhythmic click, 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 the only sound that dared to break the silence. She didn't look up. She simply slid the porcelain mug, a mundane, company-issued thing, across the slick surface of her desk until it bumped against the massive, knotted fist of the man standing in front of her. "Too lukewarm," she said, her voice a smooth, low alto that cut through the air like a scalpel. She finally lifted her gaze, her eyes the cool gray of a winter sky, framed by gold-rimmed glasses. "Report it, and intern rule number 3. Do not growl at your CEO." Across from her, Rex stood like a caged storm. He was a monument of barely constrained fury, a figure who had once commanded armies and brought rival packs to their knees with a flick of his wrist. But right now, he was squeezed into a white, off-the-rack button-up shirt. The fabric, a size too small, strained across a chest that seemed carved from granite, the taut cotton pulling against the broad expanse of his back. The sleeves were rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle, veins prominent, and pulsing with barely suppressed power. A single button, the one just above his sternum, looked ready to surrender to the pressure, threatening to launch itself across the room to join the dust motes. His jaw was clenched so tightly, a muscle feathered in his cheek, and his eyes, a deep, smoldering amber, were fixed on her with the kind of lethal focus that had made lesser wolves whimper and submit. He was a Greek god in a cubicle, and he was about to commit homicide with a coffee mug. "You dare!" he started, his voice a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in the very floorboards. The primal alpha command was woven into the sound, a dangerous frequency meant to induce submission. It was the voice he'd used to quell rebellions, to subjugate rivals, to silence entire council chambers. Chloe didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She simply picked up a sheet of paper from her desk, glanced at it, and held it up. "That's a verbal warning, Intern Rex. Using a hostile tone is a violation of Section 4, subsection B of the Company Conduct Code. Another infraction, and your performance bonus for this month is forfeited." He stared at her, the amber of his eyes flickering with a molten gold. It was the same look he'd worn 3 years ago, under the vast canopy of a blood-red moon, when he'd first laid eyes on her across the ceremonial fires. The scent of burning sage and night-blooming jasmine had filled the air that night. It was the lunar claiming ceremony, a sacred primal ritual where fated mates were bound. Rex, the newly crowned AlphaKing of the Silver Crest territory, had been at the center of the throng, his presence an undeniable gravity that pulled all eyes to him. He had felt it before he saw her, the perfect, magnetic pull of his destined mate, the Omega, who would be his queen. And then he saw Chloe. She was a vision in silver silk, her dark hair unbound, her beauty a stark, breathtaking contrast to the barbaric pomp of the ceremony. She was smiling, but it was a smile that held a hint of calculation, a glint of intelligence in her gray eyes. He'd strode towards her, confident, arrogant, ready to claim what was his by cosmic right. She'd met him halfway, her heels clicking on the stone pavers. But instead of baring her neck in submission, she'd extended a single, crisp sheet of paper. "A cursory review of your pack's financials," she'd said, her voice clear and carrying over the hushed whispers of the assembled crowd. "According to my preliminary audit, Silvercrest carries a debt-to-asset ratio of 200%. Your territory's medical infrastructure is dangerously underfunded. Your logistics network is reliant on a medieval cart system, and you have zero contingency for cross-realm trade tariffs." Rex's expression had faltered, the smug certainty replaced by a stunned, bewildered silence. The crowd had gasped. No one rejected an AlphaKing. "To be clear," Chloe had continued, tapping the paper with a manicured nail. "This is a formal rejection of the mate bond. While I find you physically adequate, I am not looking to enter into a long-term strategic partnership with a pack whose balance sheet is in shambles. It's a liability I cannot afford." She'd smiled, a flash of brilliant white teeth. "But good luck with the whole alpha thing." She'd turned on her heel, the silver silk of her dress swishing, and walked away, leaving him standing there, a king in the ruins of his own pride, the rejection declaration clutched in his shaking hand. A sharp click of Chloe's tongue brought him back to the present. "Rex," she said, his name a crisp, no-nonsense command on her lips. "The coffee. It's not going to repour itself. We have a department heads meeting in 20 minutes, and your assigned task for today is to familiarize yourself with the SOPs for cross-realm container shipments." She gestured with her pen to a stack of binders on the corner of her desk, each one at least 3 inches thick. "Read them. All of them. There will be a quiz." He hadn't moved. His massive frame seemed to block out the entire source of light in the room, his silhouette a dark, menacing monolith against the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the sprawling metropolis of Vanguard Plaza. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, the knuckles bone-white. 3 years. 3 years of humiliation, of watching his territory flounder. His pack's coffers were empty. The traditionalist elders had bled them dry with their archaic customs and their stubborn refusal to adapt. The very infrastructure that Chloe had so clinically shredded in her report had collapsed. The Silver Crest pack, once the most feared in the realm, was broke. They couldn't afford to pay their own pack healer. And so, Rex, the AlphaKing, the most lethal predator in the known world, had groveled. He'd swallowed his pride, carved out a fake identity, and applied for the entry-level sales internship at her company, the Apex Logistics Center. He'd needed to get inside, to get close to her. He didn't know if he wanted to kill her or force her to submit, to bind her to him at last. All he knew was that his instincts, the primal core of his wolf, wouldn't let him rest until she was his. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. The man who commanded a legion of wolves had just been told to fetch a coffee like a common errand boy. "I don't fetch coffee," he snarled, the words dripping with venom. Chloe finally looked up, her gray eyes locked onto his. She didn't bother to hide her exasperation. Slowly, deliberately, she pushed the mug another inch closer to him. The porcelain was warm against his knuckles, a mockery of his power. "Let me break this down for you, Rex, since the SOPs seem too complex for you at this early stage," she said, leaning back in her plush executive chair. She picked up her iced Americano, the condensation beating on the glass, and took a long, slow sip. Her gaze raked over him, from the top of his head down to his beltline. "You are an intern, an unpaid one, as per the Cross-Realm Talent Exchange Agreement. Your primary function is to support the senior executives. Right now, the senior executive is me. I require a fresh cup of coffee, brewed to a precise temperature of 195 degrees Fahrenheit. The machine in the break room has a digital readout. Are you capable of operating a digital readout, or do I need to send you to remedial training?" He could feel the veins in his neck throbbing. His inner wolf was pacing, snarling, demanding he break the desk, crush the tablet, and throw her over his shoulder like a sack of grain and claim her. His pheromones, the potent, oppressive scent of a dominant alpha, were flooding the room. The air grew thick and heavy, laced with the dark, woodsy scent of pine and ozone, the signature of a king on the verge of a bloodletting. It was a smell that made lesser wolves whine and roll over in submissive terror. Chloe's nose twitched. She set down her Americano and pressed a button on her intercom. "Karen," she said, her voice calm, "turn on the HEPA air purifiers in my office. Full power. I think an intern has developed a body odor issue." A soft, whirring sound filled the room as a sleek, modern unit near the ceiling hummed to life, sucking the oppressive, virile pheromones out of the atmosphere and replacing them with a sterile, unscented breeze. Rex watched, his eye twitching, as the invisible haze of his dominance was physically neutralized by a piece of office equipment. Now, Chloe continued, leaning forward again and tapping her pen on the desk. The mug. Move it. This was it. The precipice. He could feel the primal rage burning in his gut, the desire to rip and tear and assert the natural order of things. He was the alpha. He was the predator. She was the prey. But then he saw her eyes. There was no fear in them. Not a flicker. There was only cold, clinical irritation, the kind a project manager reserves for a software bug that just won't quit. He was, to her, not an ancient, terrifying threat, but a disgruntled, inefficient resource. The most powerful man on Earth, and to her, he was just a cost center. And that terrified him. It captivated him in a way he had never felt before. It was a power more potent than any claw or fang. It was the power of absolute, unshakable control. A low, strangled sound of pure frustration escaped his throat. His fingers, which had been poised to curl into claws and shred the pristine obsidian desk, relaxed. With a deliberate slowness that was more terrifying than any sudden movement, he reached out and took the mug. His fingers brushed against hers, his skin searing hot against her cool, professional palm. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot up his arm. She didn't react. She just watched him, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow arching slightly. He stared into the lukewarm brown liquid, his reflection a dark, angry blur. A fucking intern. He was the AlphaKing of the Silver Crest, and he was about to perform a mundane task that was beneath a servant. His grip on the mug tightened, the porcelain groaning in protest. A tiny hairline fracture, spiderwebbed across its surface. Chloe's eyes flicked down to the damage. "Add that to your personal tab," she said, her voice bored. "Vandalism of office equipment is a breach of intern rule number 7. His gaze met hers once more. He held her stare, pouring every ounce of his dominance, his fury, and his desperate obsession into the look. He was trying to break her, to bend her will to his. She met it with a placid, unnerving calm. Then she did the unthinkable. She smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark, of a corporate raider who just saw a weakness in her target's armor. "Tick-tock, Rex," she said, pointing at the clock on the wall. "The caffeine delivery is now 2 minutes overdue. The break room is on the 4th floor. You have 7 minutes until the meeting starts. And I suggest you take the stairs. The elevator takes too long." She turned her attention back to the files on her desk, dismissing him. "I'll need it black. No sugar, no milk, and if I see so much as a single coffee ground in it, I'll be deducting the cleaning fee from your tiny, non-existent paycheck." Rex stood there, rooted to the spot, the broken mug in his hand. His chest heaved, the fabric of his shirt straining to contain the swell of his rage. He was a mess of warring instincts, the primal alpha screaming for a violent submission, and a new, more unsettling feeling. It was something akin to respect, maybe even obsession, for the sheer, terrifying audacity of this woman who had reduced him to a coffee-fetching statistic. He bit his lip, hard enough to taste blood. The sharp, metallic taste centered him. He had come here to regain his pride, to bend her to his will, to force a union that would save his pack. He was not leaving until he succeeded. Without a word, he turned. The cheap Oxfords, too small for his massive feet, squeaked on the polished marble floor as he took a step toward the door. He paused, his back to her, his entire frame quivering with suppressed violence. "Any other requirements, Miss CEO?" The title was a sneer, a final, futile act of defiance. "Yes, actually," she said, not looking up from her tablet. "When you come back, bring me a donut, a glazed one, and use a napkin. I don't want grease on my desk." The door clicked shut behind him. the sound of final, damning verdict on his former identity. He stood in the plush, silent corridor, surrounded by the posters of corporate synergy and diversity, clutching the broken mug like a talisman. He could still hear the faint, infuriating click, click, click of her pen against the tablet, a metronome counting down the seconds of his dignity. His wolf was howling in impotent fury, but he silenced it with a single, ironclad thought. He would fetch the coffee. He would earn his place. He would prove his worth. He would do it through her own rules, her own game. He would make her see him. And once she did, he would make her pay for every single act of defiance that had led him to this, the most humiliating moment in the history of the Silver Crest. But as he started walking towards the stairwell, the image of her gray eyes, sharp and untouchable, burned itself into his mind. And somewhere, deep in the fractured heart of the AlphaKing, a tiny, reluctant seed of admiration took root. He paused outside the break room, staring at the sleek, intimidating espresso machine with a sneer of pure contempt. Intern rule number 3, he thought. Don't growl at your CEO. His hands were shaking as he tossed the broken mug into the trash. He was going to learn all the rules. He was going to master them. And then he was going to break them all. Starting with the one about the coffee being the only thing he was supposed to fetch. The Monday morning corporate strategy meeting was in full swing, the 15th floor conference room of Vanguard Plaza buzzing with the low hum of the HVAC system and the sharp scent of expensive markers. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the long, polished mahogany table where a dozen department heads sat, their tablets and laptops arranged like a digital army. Chloe stood at the head of the table, a sleek remote in one hand, her iced Americano in the other, tapping through a presentation on the massive wall-mounted screen. The Q3 cross-realm shipping expansion is on track, she said, her voice carrying that crisp, no-nonsense tone that made even the most seasoned executives sit up straighter. We've secured docking rights in 3 new territories, and the automated sorting algorithm is outperforming projections by 12%. A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Then, the glass door to the conference room slid open with a soft hiss, and a man strode in. He was tall, but not Rex tall. Dressed in an immaculate charcoal suit, his hair slicked back with enough product to grease a gearbox, he carried the smarmy confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life. "Mr. Sterling," Chloe said, not missing a beat. "I don't recall seeing your name on the agenda." Gregor Sterling, the regional director of a rival logistics conglomerate, flashed a smile that was all teeth. "I'm here as a courtesy, Ms. Vance. Thought I'd drop by and offer my insights on your little expansion plan." He sauntered to the table, placing a thick, glossy proposal down with a theatrical thud. "See, I've been reviewing your projections, and I have to say, they're optimistic. Borderline delusional, really." The room went still. Several department heads exchanged nervous glances. Chloe's expression remained unchanged, her gray eyes fixed on Gregor like a hawk, sizing up a particularly stupid mouse. Behind her, pressed against the back wall of the conference room, Rex stood rigid. He'd been assigned to observe the meeting, a clipboard clutched in his massive hands, the cheap white shirt straining against his chest. His amber eyes were fixed on Gregor with a cold, predatory intensity. The man's scent was rank with arrogance and cheap cologne, and every word out of his mouth made Rex's wolf bristle. "You see," Gregor continued, spreading his hands across the table, "your logistics network is reliant on the Twilight Passage routes, which are notoriously unstable. My firm has data suggesting a 23% failure rate in that corridor over the next fiscal year. Your entire expansion is built on a house of cards." Chloe tilted her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Fascinating. And your data comes from?" "Industry sources," Gregor said smoothly. "Trusted ones." "How specific?" Chloe set down her Americano and picked up her tablet pen. "And your proposal, Mr. Sterling? Is it a peace offering or a threat?" Gregor's smile widened. "Let's call it a friendly warning. You could partner with us, share the routes, or you could watch your empire crumble when the Twilight Passage goes dark. He tapped the proposal with a manicured finger. Page 17 outlines the terms. I'd recommend reading it carefully. The silence that followed was suffocating. The department heads looked like they were holding their breath, caught between their loyalty to Chloe and the palpable pressure of a rival executive's aggression. Rex's grip on his clipboard tightened. The plastic groaned. His jaw was clenched so hard his teeth ached. The man was a worm. A slimy, posturing worm who had no right to stand in Chloe's presence and make threats. The alpha in him, the primal king who had once crushed rival packs for far less, was howling for blood. Gregor, oblivious to the danger lurking behind Chloe, leaned forward. I'd hate to see you fail, Ms. Vance. It would be such a waste of a brilliant mind. He licked his lips. You could always come work for me. I'd make it worth your while. That was it. Rex moved. The clipboard hit the floor with a clatter that echoed through the stunned silence. His massive frame seemed to fill the room as he stepped forward, his Oxford slamming against the polished concrete with each deliberate stride. The cheap white shirt stretched across his back, the fabric pulling taut as his shoulders bunched with barely contained violence. She's not interested, Rex said, his voice a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Gregor blinked, startled. Excuse me? Who the hell are you? I'm the man who's going to tear your pathetic proposal in half, Rex snarled. And he did. His massive hands shot out, snatching the glossy proposal from the table. With a single, brutal motion, he ripped the thick stack of papers in two. The sound of tearing paper was sharp and violent, a primal crack that made several executives flinch. Rex dropped the halves on the table, his chest heaving, his amber eyes blazing with molten gold. But he didn't stop there. The alpha pheromones exploded from him like a shockwave, dark and oppressive, a thick, cloying scent of pine and ozone and territorial fury. It filled the conference room in seconds, pressing down on everyone like a physical weight. The department heads paled, their wolves, if they had them, cowering in submission. One of the junior analysts, a nervous beta, actually whimpered and slid lower in his chair. Gregor's face went chalk white, his bravado evaporating as his instincts screamed at him to run, to flee, to submit to the dominant predator in the room. Rex leaned over the table, his massive frame casting Gregor in shadow. You will leave, he growled, the alpha command woven into every syllable. And you will never come back. Or, I will show you exactly what happens to people who threaten what's mine. The room was silent, frozen, a tableau of terror. Then, a soft click. Chloe had pressed a button on the sleek remote in her hand. From the corner of the conference room, a high-powered Dyson air purifier whirred to life, its sleek silver cylinder humming as it began to suck the oppressive pheromones from the air. The sterile breeze cut through the tension, replacing the scent of dominance with clean, filtered nothingness. She set down the remote and picked up a small notepad from the table, her movements unhurried, almost bored. Intern Rex, she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. A brief reminder. She didn't look up, her pen scratching across the paper. Strange odors and pheromone pollution are strictly prohibited in executive spaces. This is a professional environment, not a dog kennel. Rex's head snapped towards her, his eyes still blazing. The words hit him like a physical blow. He opened his mouth, a retort already forming, but she continued, her tone utterly calm. Furthermore, tearing a competitor's proposal constitutes destruction of office property. She tore the slip of paper from her notepad with a crisp sound and slid it across the table towards him. That's a $50 fine, deducted from your next evaluation. The slip of paper sat there, a damning piece of evidence. Rex stared at it, his nostrils flaring, his hands trembling with the effort of holding himself back. He could feel the eyes of the entire room on him, the stunned, disbelieving stares of the department heads, the barely suppressed terror of the junior analyst, the smug, recovering mask of Gregor Sterling. "You," Gregor started, his voice shaky but regaining its arrogant edge, "are insane. This is—" "Mr. Sterling," Chloe interrupted, finally looking up from her notepad. "I believe intern Rex has made our position clear. Your proposal is rejected. I suggest you leave before I have security escort you out." She smiled, a cold, surgical thing. "And do remember to bill us for the cleaning fee for the pheromone contamination." Gregor's face cycled through a series of expressions: fury, confusion, and finally, a grudging respect for the sheer audacity of the woman who had just disciplined a man who could kill her with a flick of his wrist. He gathered the torn halves of his proposal, muttering something under his breath, and stormed out of the room. The door hissed shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Chloe turned back to the room, her expression completely composed, as if nothing had happened. "As I was saying," she said, tapping the remote to advance her presentation, "the Q3 expansion is on track. Any questions?" A hand shot up. It was a timid, bespectacled man from the legal department. "Ms. Vance, regarding the fines, is that standard policy?" "It is now," Chloe said, her eyes flicking briefly to Rex. "I'll be updating the intern code of conduct to include clauses on property damage and atmospheric management. Intern Rex will be the test case." She pulled out a tablet and began typing. "Effective immediately." Rex was still standing by the table, his massive frame rigid with humiliation. The cheap white shirt was damp with sweat, the collar straining against his thick neck. His chest heaved with shallow, ragged breaths. He had just crushed a rival with his sheer presence, something that would have earned him respect and fear in his pack. Here, in this sterile conference room, it had earned him a $50 fine. The air purifier hummed softly, a constant reminder of his defeat. One of the senior executives, a grizzled beta named Marcus, leaned over to whisper to the woman beside him. His voice carried, just barely, across the table. "Dude just got fined for being too alpha," Marcus muttered, his eyes wide. "I've seen everything now." The woman stifled a snort. "Did you see the way she just clicked the button? Like he was a malfunctioning appliance. I'm never going to complain about the thermostat again." Rex's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He could hear them. Of course he could. His wolf hearing was too sharp, too acute. Every whisper, every stifled laugh, every nervous shuffle was amplified in his ears. The men who had once trembled at his name were now gossiping about him like he was a wayward intern who'd spilled coffee on the boardroom table. Chloe finished her typing and looked up, meeting his gaze. Her gray eyes were unreadable, but he caught the faintest flicker of something. Amusement? Approval? He couldn't tell. She raised one perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Sit down, intern Rex," she said, gesturing to an empty chair near the back wall. "You can observe the rest of the meeting from there. Quietly." He wanted to refuse. He wanted to roar, to shift, to tear the room apart and remind everyone who he really was. But the memory of her calm, unbothered face, the way she'd reduced his full alpha display to a minor HR infraction, it froze him in place. He sat. The chair groaned under his weight, the cheap metal legs screeching against the floor. He leaned back, crossing his massive arms, and stared at the back of Chloe's head as she resumed her presentation. Her dark lattice hair bun was immaculate, not a strand out of place. Her tailored blazer sat perfectly on her shoulders. She was the picture of corporate control, and he was a blip on her radar. The meeting dragged on. Charts were presented. Projections were discussed. Rex's mind was a storm of rage and confusion, and a dark, grudging respect. He'd never been disciplined in his life. Not by his father, not by his pack elders, not by anyone. He was the AlphaKing. He gave orders. He didn't take them. And yet, here he was, $50 poorer, his pride in tatters, his pheromones neutralized by a Dyson. As the meeting wound down, Chloe dismissed the department heads with a crisp nod. Thank you, everyone. Great work. Marcus, I want those revised numbers on my desk by 3. The room emptied, executives shuffling out with their tablets and laptops, casting wary glances at the towering intern still seated in the corner. When the door hissed shut, Chloe was alone with Rex. She walked over to him, her heels clicking against the concrete, and stopped a few feet away. She looked up at him, had to look up, he was so tall, and studied his face with that same clinical precision. Intern Rex, she said. A few observations. He said nothing, his amber eyes burning into hers. Your display of aggression was counterproductive, she continued, ticking off points on her fingers. It alienated potential allies, disrupted the meeting, and created a hostile work environment. In a pack, that might work. In my company, it's a liability. She paused, waiting for a response. When none came, she tilted her head. However, she added, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, I will admit that your presence did have a deterrent effect. Gregor won't be back, so consider the fine a minor setback, and the lesson a valuable one. Rex's jaw tightened. Is that all? That's all, she said, turning away. Now get back to your cubicle. I want a summary of this meeting on my desk by end of day. 2 pages, single-spaced. And Rex? He paused at the door, his massive frame silhouetted against the bright corridor. Next time, she said, not looking back, try using words. They're cheaper than the cleaning bill. The door hissed shut behind him. Rex stood in the hallway, his hands shaking with a cocktail of rage and something else, something he refused to name. The interns in the nearby cubicles were staring at him, their eyes wide, their whispers a low hum of speculation. He ignored them, storming back to his tiny cubicle, a cramped space barely large enough to contain his frame. He sat down, the cheap chair groaning in protest, and stared at the blank screen of his monitor. The $50 fine slip was still in his hand, the paper crumpled from his grip. He smoothed it out, reading the neat, precise handwriting. Intern Rex, destruction of office property, fine, $50, deducted from next evaluation. It was absurd. It was humiliating. And yet, as he sat there, the image of Chloe's unbothered face burned into his mind. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't cowered. She'd faced down an AlphaKing and come out on top, armed with nothing but a Dyson and a notepad. His wolf was still snarling, still demanding retribution. But Rex silenced it with a single, grudging thought. She was right. Brute force meant nothing in her corporate kingdom. He'd have to find another way to prove his worth, another way to earn her respect, another way to claim her. He pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began typing the meeting summary, his massive fingers clumsy on the small keyboard. It was the most humiliating task of his life. But he'd do it. He'd do every single task she assigned him, no matter how demeaning. Because he would make her see him. And once she saw him, truly saw him, he would make her understand exactly what she'd rejected. His phone buzzed. An email notification. Subject reminder. SOP quiz tomorrow, 8 a.m., see Vance. He stared at the screen, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Then, slowly, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. The AlphaKing of the Silver Crest was going to study for a quiz, and he was going to ace it. The alarm shrieked through the cavernous expanse of the Apex Logistics Center, a high-pitched electronic wail that echoed off the distant steel rafters. Rain lashed against the corrugated metal roof in a relentless assault, the sound a dull roar that competed with the mechanical hum of conveyor belts and the intermittent beep of reversing forklifts. At 2 a.m, the 100,000-square-foot automated distribution hub was a symphony of chaos, red warning lights strobing across the ceiling, stacks of inventory blinking with error codes, and a small army of overnight staff scrambling to contain the disaster. Chloe stood in the center of the chaos, a lone island of composure in a sea of frantic movement. Her tailored navy blazer was gone, abandoned in her office, leaving her in a crisp white silk blouse that was somehow still immaculate despite the hour. Her dark lattice hair bun was slightly askew, a few strands escaping to frame her face. Dark circles shadowed her gray eyes, but her grip on her tablet was steady, her thumb scrolling through endless rows of data. "Talk to me," she said, her voice cutting through the noise as she approached a cluster of panicked logistics supervisors. Her iced Americano was in her other hand, the glass beaded with condensation. "How bad is it?" "Catastrophic, Miss Vance," stammered a young man named Derek, his face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. The moisture sensors in Sector 7 failed. The entire shipment of cross-realm medical supplies, 3,000 units, is at risk of contamination. We've got water damage across 2 entire aisles of the automated shelving. Chloe's jaw tightened, a muscle flickering in her cheek. "How much of it is salvageable?" "We're still assessing," Derek said, wringing his hands. "The robots can't navigate the damaged sections. The barcode scanners can't read the labels through the moisture. We're blind down there." "Then we go manual," Chloe said, her tone brooking no argument. "Pull everyone from the secondary sorting line. I want human eyes on every single unit." "But Ms. Vance, the volume?" "I don't care about the volume," she snapped, her gray eyes flashing with barely restrained frustration. "I care about the shipment. Those medical supplies are contractually obligated to the Twilight Territories by dawn. If we fail to deliver, we lose the contract. If we lose the contract, we lose the expansion. Do you understand me?" Derek nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, ma'am. I'll get the team together." Chloe turned, her heels clicking against the polished concrete, and started walking toward the damaged section of the warehouse. The automated shelving rose on either side of her, towering steel monoliths stretching up into the dim, shadowy heights. Conveyor belts snaked overhead, carrying undamaged inventory to safety. A forklift rumbled past, its driver shouting warnings over the rain. She didn't notice the massive figure emerging from the shadows of the nearest aisle until she nearly collided with him. Rex stepped into her path, his towering frame blocking the flickering light. His intern jacket was gone, discarded somewhere, leaving him in the same cheap white shirt. But now, the top 3 buttons were undone, revealing a thick, muscular chest dusted with dark hair. The sleeves were rolled up past his elbows, exposing forearms thick as tree limbs, corded with veins and sinew. His amber eyes glowed with a predatory intensity, scanning the chaos around him. "You shouldn't be here," Chloe said, not breaking stride. "This is a restricted area. You're not cleared for." "I heard the alarm," Rex said, falling into step beside her. His voice was low, steady, devoid of the growl that usually accompanied his words. "I was in the break room, working on the SOP quiz." Chloe shot him a skeptical glance. "At 2 in the morning?" "I have a lot to learn," he said, and there was no sarcasm in his voice. It was a simple, honest statement that made her pause, just for a fraction of a second. They reached the edge of the damaged section. The automated shelving here was dark, the lights flickering erratically. Water dripped from the ceiling in a steady rhythm, pooling on the concrete floor. Stacked pallets of wooden crates, each one stamped with the Apex Logistics logo, were soaked through, their cardboard exteriors warped and discolored. "This is the inventory," Chloe said, gesturing with her tablet. 3,000 units of medical supplies. We need to assess the damage and salvage what we can. But I can't see anything in this darkness. And the barcode scanners are useless." Rex stepped forward, his head tilted, his nostrils flaring slightly. His eyes, still glowing with that feral amber, swept across the towering shelves. "I can see," he said simply. Chloe frowned. "Excuse me?" I can see, he repeated, turning to face her. And I can smell the damage. The moisture has compromised the outer packaging on about 60% of the units, but the inner containment seals are intact on most of them. The ones on the lower shelves are the worst. That's where the water pooled. She stared at him, her gray eyes narrowing. How can you possibly know that? Rex didn't answer. He simply walked into the darkness, his massive frame disappearing between the towering shelves. Chloe hesitated for only a moment before following him, her heels splashing through the shallow water pooling on the floor. He stopped in front of a stack of crates, his hand reaching out to touch the damp cardboard. This one, he said, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. It's damaged, but the one behind it is still dry. He lifted the top crate with one hand, his biceps straining against the fabric of his shirt, and set it aside with a casual ease that made Chloe's eyes widen. The crate must have weighed at least 200 pounds, and he handled it like it was empty. Are you? She started, then stopped, her professional composure cracking just slightly. Are you using your wolf senses? For inventory management? Rex glanced back at her, a faint smirk playing at the corner of his lips. Is that a problem? It's unexpected, she admitted, moving closer with her tablet. Show me which ones are salvageable. For the next hour, they worked in tandem. Rex moved through the darkness with an uncanny grace, his night vision allowing him to navigate the treacherous, water-slicked floors without hesitation. He lifted crate after crate, his massive hands gripping the wood with a practiced ease, his muscles bunching and flexing with each movement. The cheap white shirt was soaked through with sweat and rainwater, clinging to his back like a second skin. His chest heaved with exertion, the fabric straining against the swell of his pectorals. Chloe followed behind him, her tablet in hand, scanning the barcodes on the undamaged crates. She was exhausted, the dark circles under her eyes more pronounced in the flickering fluorescent light. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Every crate she checked off was a small victory, a step toward salvaging the contract. 217 units salvaged, she murmured, her voice hoarse. We need to find more. Rex paused, turning to face her. Water dripped from his hair, plastering the dark strands to his forehead. His amber eyes were fixed on her face, studying her with an intensity that made her pause. You're exhausted, he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple observation. I'm fine, Chloe said, her tone clipped. Focus on the inventory. Chloe. His voice was soft, almost gentle. It was the first time he'd used her first name, and it hit her like a physical blow. She looked up, meeting his gaze. I can handle this, he said, gesturing to the shelves. You need to rest. Take 5 minutes. Drink some water. She opened her mouth to argue, but he was already moving, disappearing into the darkness to retrieve another crate. When he returned, he was holding a bottle of water, cracked it open from a vending machine, by the looks of it, and pressed it into her hand. You've been running this company for years, he said, his voice low. I've seen the numbers. I've seen the reports. You built this empire from nothing. But even empires need maintenance, Chloe. Even CEOs need to breathe. She stared at the bottle of water in her hand, then back at him. His face was earnest, his amber eyes devoid of their usual fury. He looked like a man who had seen something he didn't expect, and was humbled by it. You're not what I expected, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Neither are you, he said, and there was a raw honesty in his words that made her chest tighten. She took a sip of the water, the cool liquid soothing her parched throat. Rex nodded, satisfied, and turned back to the shelves. Next stack, he said, his voice firm. Let's get this done. They worked until dawn. The rain stopped at 4:47 a.m., the sudden silence almost more jarring than the noise had been. The automated systems hummed back to life as the technicians finally isolated the moisture damage, and the robots began their slow, methodical dance through the aisles. But Rex and Chloe kept working, pulling crate after crate from the dark corners of the damaged sector. By the time the first gray light of dawn filtered through the high windows, they had salvaged over 2,000 units of the medical supplies. Chloe's tablet glowed with the final tally, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed the last confirmation. 2,043 units, she said, her voice cracking with exhaustion. That's enough. We can fulfill the contract. Rex stood beside her, his chest still heaving, his shirt plastered to his body with sweat. His hands were raw from lifting the crates, the skin red and chafed, but there was a look of quiet satisfaction on his face, a pride that had nothing to do with dominance or intimidation. Chloe turned to him, her gray eyes meeting his amber ones. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fluorescent lights flickered above them, casting long shadows across the warehouse floor. "Thank you," she said, and the words were genuine, raw, unpolished. "I couldn't have done this without you." Rex nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I didn't do it for you," he said. "I did it because it needed to be done. Because—" he paused, searching for the right words. "Because you built something worth protecting. That's the real leadership, isn't it? Not terrorizing people into submission. Protecting what matters." Chloe's lips parted slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, a technician approached. Her clipboard clutched to her chest. "Miss Vance, the Twilight Territory's shipment is ready for departure," the woman said, glancing nervously between Chloe and the massive sweat-soaked intern standing beside her. "We've got the convoy loaded and the routes confirmed." Chloe tore her gaze away from Rex, nodding curtly. "Good. Get it moving. I want confirmation of delivery within 4 hours." The technician scurried away, and Chloe turned back to Rex. The exhaustion was still etched on her face, but there was a new energy in her eyes, a spark of something she couldn't quite name. "You should get some sleep," she said. "You've earned it." "So have you," he replied. She smiled, a real smile, small but genuine, and shook her head. "I don't sleep," she said. "I have an empire to run." He watched her walk away, her heels clicking against the concrete, her posture still impossibly straight despite the long night. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching the gold rims of her glasses, the dark strands of her hair. Rex stood in the middle of the warehouse, surrounded by the hum of machinery and the quiet bustle of the morning shift. His hands ached, his back was sore, his shirt was ruined, and for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than rage. He felt respect. Deep, unshakable respect for the woman who had turned a logistics crisis into a triumph, who had faced impossible odds and refused to back down, who had built an empire with her bare hands and now protected it with every ounce of her strength. He looked down at his hands, the same hands that had once crushed his enemies, the same hands that had torn proposals and shattered mugs. Now, they were raw from lifting wooden crates, from working alongside her, from proving his worth through labor instead of force. The AlphaKing of the Silver Crest had spent the night stacking boxes, and he had never felt more like a king. He walked back to the break room, his Oxford squelching with each step. The interns were already arriving, their eyes wide as they took in his disheveled appearance. He ignored them, grabbing a fresh bottle of water from the vending machine. When he returned to his cubicle, he found a note taped to his monitor. Chloe's handwriting, neat and precise. "Intern Rex, overtime approved. Double bonus credited to your valuation. SOP quiz postponed to Thursday. Don't get used to it. C. Vance." He stared at the note, a slow, reluctant smile spreading across his face. She had noticed. She had actually noticed. And for the first time since he'd walked into her office with a broken mug, Rex allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he could earn her respect. Not through fear, not through force, but through work, through loyalty. through proving that he was worth more than the sum of his failures. He tucked the note into his pocket, next to the $50 fine slip, and sat down at his desk. The AlphaKing had a quiz to study for. The Crystal Pavilion shimmered like a frozen waterfall against the night sky of Vanguard Plaza, its floor-to-ceiling glass walls reflecting the glittering lights of the city skyline. Inside, the who's who of the cross-realm corporate world mingled beneath cascading chandeliers, champagne flutes clinking in a symphony of polished affluence. The press conference was in full swing. Journalists and cameras clustered near the stage where Chloe was scheduled to deliver her quarterly address. Chloe stood near the center of the room, a vision of effortless power in a crimson pantsuit that hugged her curves with surgical precision. The gold-rimmed glasses sat perfectly on her nose, her dark lattice hair bun immaculate, not a strand out of place. She held a flute of champagne, mostly untouched, and nodded politely as a succession of executives pressed their business cards into her hand. The doors to the pavilion slid open with a soft hiss, and a ripple of unease passed through the crowd. Heads turned. Murmurs died. Gregor Sterling, the same smarmy regional director from the conference room ambush, strode in with a retinue of sharp-suited advisors, his smile a razor's edge. But it wasn't Gregor who drew the room's attention. Behind him, looming like a shadow-given form, Rex followed. Gone was the cheap off-the-rack intern shirt, replaced by a tailored black suit that fit his massive frame like a second skin. The jacket stretched across his shoulders, the fabric straining with each subtle movement. His white dress shirt was buttoned to the collar, a black silk tie knotted with precision. His jaw was clean-shaven, his dark hair swept back from his forehead, revealing the sharp planes of his face. His amber eyes, cold and predatory, swept across the room with the lazy assessment of an apex predator surveying his territory. He looked like a bodyguard. He moved like a king. Chloe's gaze flicked to him as he entered, her expression unreadable. She raised an eyebrow, a silent question, and Rex responded with the faintest incline of his head. Acknowledgement. Submission. The dynamic was so subtle that only she would have noticed. But she did notice, and a small, satisfied smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Miss Vance," Gregor's voice cut through the murmur, smooth and oily as ever. "What a pleasure to see you again. I trust your intern has been practicing his manners?" The crowd tittered nervously. Chloe's smile didn't waver. "Intern Rex has been an exemplary addition to the team," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "He's proven to be quite adaptable, even to the most challenging environments." Gregor's smile tightened, his eyes flicking to Rex. The Alpha stood behind Chloe, his massive arms crossed over his chest, his gaze fixed on Gregor with a chilling intensity. A low, almost imperceptible growl rumbled in Rex's chest, too soft for human ears but not for Gregor's wolf. Gregor paled slightly but recovered quickly. He stepped forward, his voice rising to address the gathered journalists. "Adaptable, indeed," he said, spreading his hands. "I've heard some fascinating rumors about the Apex Logistics Center. Interesting choices in staffing, Miss Vance. Some might say unwise." Chloe's eyes narrowed. "If you have something to say, Mr. Sterling, say it. I don't have time for theater." Gregor's smile widened, revealing teeth. "Very well. I've received credible information that your company is employing unregistered supernaturals, wolves without proper documentation, illegal hires in violation of cross-realm labor laws." He paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. "How do you explain that to your shareholders, Ms. Vance? Or the SEC?" The room erupted into whispers. Cameras flashed. Journalists pressed forward, microphones extended like weapons. Chloe didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of her champagne, letting the silence stretch, savoring the tension. Then she set the glass down on a nearby table and stepped toward the stage. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice calm and cutting, You come into my house, at my event, and you level baseless accusations without a shred of evidence. She pulled out her tablet, her thumb swiping across the screen. Allow me to educate you on exactly how wrong you are. The press conference monitors flickered to life, displaying a live feed of Apex Logistics compliance data. Chloe's voice rang out, sharp and authoritative. Section 12, subsection C of the Cross-Realm Employment Act requires all supernatural employees to register with the Interspecies Labor Board within 30 days of hire. Apex Logistics is in full compliance. She tapped the screen, pulling up a certified audit report. As of this morning, 100% of our supernatural employees are registered, documented, and tax compliant. Gregor's smug expression faltered. That's a convenient display. But my sources say... Your sources are either misinformed or deliberately lying, Chloe cut him off, her gray eyes blazing. Let's talk about facts, Mr. Sterling. In the past fiscal year, Apex Logistics has increased quarterly revenue by 34%, expanded our workforce by 18%, and maintained a 99.7% on-time delivery rate across all territories. She pulled up another slide, this one showing a head-to-head comparison with Gregor's own company. Your company, on the other hand, has seen a 12% decline in revenue, a 16% turnover rate in executive staff, and an ongoing investigation by the Interspecies Ethics Committee for, how did they phrase it? Questionable hiring practices in the Twilight Passage corridor. The room erupted. Journalists scrambled, their pens flying across notepads, their microphones jostling for position. Gregor's face went from smug to ashen to a mottled, furious red. That's slander, he sputtered, his composure cracking. You have no right. I have every right, Chloe said, her voice cutting through his protests like a blade. I'm protecting my company's reputation from a baseless smear campaign, and I have the documentation to prove it. She smiled, cold and brilliant. Would you like to see the SEC filings? I have them right here. Gregor stepped forward, his fists clenched, his face contorted with rage. The alpha in him was rising, his eyes flickering with the telltale gold of a wolf about to lose control. He lunged toward Chloe, a snarl ripping from his throat. And Rex moved. He didn't say a word. He didn't growl, didn't roar, didn't make any of the overt displays of dominance that had gotten him fined $50. He simply stepped out from behind Chloe, his massive frame sliding into the light like a glacier shifting into the path of a ship. The black suit stretched across his shoulders as he flexed, his arms uncrossing to hang at his sides. His amber eyes locked onto Gregor's with an icy, predatory stillness that was more terrifying than any threat. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The air grew thick, charged with an invisible pressure that made the journalist take a collective step backward. Gregor froze mid-lunge, his eyes wide, his wolf instincts screaming at him to retreat, to submit, to flee from the apex predator that had just materialized in front of him. His foot slipped on the polished floor, and he stumbled backward, his champagne flute flying from his hand and shattering against the marble. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the stunned silence. Rex didn't move, didn't blink. His gaze held Gregor like a wolf holding a rabbit, silent and absolute. His chest rose and fell with slow, measured breaths, the fabric of his suit stretching with each expansion. Gregor's face went pale, his bravado evaporating like mist in the sun. He scrambled backward, his heel catching on a chair, and he fell hard, landing in an undignified heap on the floor. The room was dead silent. Chloe looked down at Gregor, her expression one of clinical detachment. Then she pulled a small notepad from the pocket of her crimson blazer and scribbled something with a gold pen. The scratch of the pen was the only sound in the cavernous room. "Excellent physical deterrent strategy, Intern Rex," she said, her voice carrying across the motionless crowd. She tore the note from the pad and handed it to him. You've earned a promotion to senior security assistant, effective immediately. Rex took the note, his amber eyes flicking down to read the words. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. Not a triumphant smirk, but something quieter. Something akin to respect. Chloe turned back to the journalists, her composure completely restored. Now, as I was saying, she said, gesturing to the live feeds on the monitors, I'm happy to take any questions about our quarterly performance. Mr. Sterling, you're welcome to stay, but I'd recommend you clean up first. Blood is so hard to get out of marble. A wave of laughter rippled through the crowd, nervous at first, then genuine. Cameras flashed. Journalists scribbled notes. Gregor scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of humiliation, and slunk out of the pavilion with his advisors trailing behind him like chastened puppies. Chloe spent the next 20 minutes fielding questions with her trademark precision, her voice never wavering, her smile never faltering. Rex stood behind her, a silent sentinel, his presence a constant reminder to the room that any aggression would be met with overwhelming force. When the press conference finally wound down, the pavilion began to empty, guests and journalists trickling out into the cool night air. Chloe remained on the stage, her tablet in hand, reviewing the footage of her counterattack. Rex approached, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. You didn't need me, he said, his voice low. You had it handled. Chloe looked up, her gray eyes meeting his. I know, she said, but it was useful to have you there. Your presence added weight to the rebuttal. He tilted his head, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. Weight? Intimidation, she clarified, her tone clinical. Strategic, targeted intimidation. It's an effective tool in corporate negotiation. She paused, studying him. You're learning to use it with precision. That's commendable. Rex's smile widened, just a fraction. From the woman who fined me $50 for the same thing. Context is everything, Chloe said, tapping her tablet. In a conference room, aggression is a liability. In a public setting, against a hostile opponent, controlled aggression is an asset. She looked him up and down, her gaze lingering on the tailored suit. You clean up well, Intern Rex, or should I say, Senior Security Assistant Rex. Rex is fine, he said, his voice soft. She nodded, tucking her tablet under her arm. The promotion comes with a raise, a small one. You're still an intern, technically. Of course. And I expect you to maintain the same standards of professionalism. No pheromone contamination, no property damage, and absolutely no growling at my competitors unless I explicitly authorize it. Rex's lips twitched. Understood, Ms. Vance. She turned to leave, her heels clicking against the marble. But at the door, she paused, looking back over her shoulder. Rex, she said, her voice softer now. Good work tonight. He inclined his head, a gesture of acknowledgement that was almost a bow. Always. She walked out into the night, leaving him standing in the empty pavilion beneath the glittering chandeliers. Rex looked down at the note in his hand, Chloe's neat handwriting crisp and precise. Promotion to Senior Security Assistant. Effective immediately. The AlphaKing of the Silver Crest had just been promoted. And for the first time in his life, the title felt like a victory, not a consolation prize. He tucked the note into his jacket pocket, next to the crumpled $50 fine slip and the note she'd left on his monitor. His collection of Chloe's words was growing, each one a small, precious victory. He walked out into the night, his suit immaculate, his head held high. The king had found a new way to rule, and he was just getting started. The blood moon hung low over Vanguard Plaza, a swollen crimson orb that bathed the city in an eerie, coppery glow. Inside the Apex Logistics headquarters, the executive floor hummed with the quiet rhythm of after-hours maintenance, the soft whir of servers, the distant beep of security keypads, the faint flicker of monitors left on standby. Chloe sat in her corner office, the city lights twinkling behind her through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her tablet was propped against her iced Americano, a stack of quarterly reports spread across her desk. She'd dismissed the cleaning staff hours ago, preferring the solitude of the empty building to the chaos of her penthouse apartment. The red light of the blood moon filtered through the glass, casting long, bloody shadows across her workspace. She reached for her Americano, the glass cold against her fingertips. And the world exploded. The floor-to-ceiling windows shattered inward with a deafening crash. A cascade of razor-sharp glass shards raining across the executive suite. Emergency alarms blared to life, their shrill wail cutting through the sudden chaos. Red strobe lights flickered on, painting the office in violent pulses of crimson. Chloe dropped to the floor behind her desk, her hand already reaching for the emergency backup drive tucked beneath the mahogany surface. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady as she slammed the drive into her tablet, initiating a high-speed data transfer. Through the gaping hole, where the windows had been, figures poured into the room. They were massive, clad in black tactical gear, their eyes glowing with the feral yellow of rogue wolves. Their weapons glinted in the red light, serrated blades, reinforced batons, and the unmistakable glint of silver-tipped bullets. "Secure the target!" one of them roared, his voice a guttural snarl. "Kill anyone who gets in the way!" Chloe's fingers flew across her tablet screen, her eyes scanning the transfer progress bar. 30%, 40, 50. The encrypted drives were her company's lifeblood, proprietary logistics algorithms, client contracts, cross-realm trade agreements. If they fell into the wrong hands, her empire would crumble. A massive hand closed around her ankle, yanking her out from under the desk. She hit the floor hard, the tablet skidding from her grasp. The rogue wolf loomed above her, his face twisted into a cruel grin. "Got her," he growled, his breath hot and rank. "Boss said to bring her alive. Didn't say she had to be pretty." Chloe's gray eyes blazed with cold fury. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She drove her heeled shoe into his kneecap with surgical precision, feeling the satisfying crunch of bone. The wolf howled, his grip loosening, and she scrambled for the tablet. A roar split the night. It wasn't a human sound. It was primal, ancient, a sound that vibrated in the bones and made the very air tremble. The rogue wolf froze, his yellow eyes widening with sudden, dawning terror. Rex tore through the shattered doorway of Chloe's office, his tailored suit jacket already shredded, the fabric hanging in tatters from his massive frame. His amber eyes were molten gold, blazing with a fury that transcended rage. His bones began to crack, a sickening symphony of snaps and pops as his body expanded, his spine elongating, his jaw distending. The cheap dress shirt exploded off his chest as his torso broadened, muscle and sinew rippling beneath a coat of thick silver-gray fur. His hands curved into massive paws, claws extending like curved daggers. His face contorted, his features shifting into a terrifying, woven visage, all fangs and fury. The blood moon outside flooded the room with crimson light, and Rex, the AlphaKing, became the beast. The silver-gray wolf was a monument of destruction, easily 7 feet tall at the shoulder, his massive body barely contained by the ceiling height. His eyes blazed like twin suns, and his snarl was a sound that promised death. He lunged at the rogue wolf still gripping Chloe's ankle, his jaws closing around the man's arm with a sickening crunch. The rogue screamed, his arm dangling at a grotesque angle. But Rex didn't stop. He shook his massive head, flinging the wolf across the room like a rag doll. The body crashed through a glass conference table, the surface shattering into 1,000 glittering fragments. Chloe scrambled backward, her tablet clutched to her chest, her eyes wide as she watched the carnage unfold. The red strobe lights painted the scene in stark, violent strokes. Rex's massive silver form moving through the chaos with lethal precision. His claws raking across enemy throats, his fangs tearing through tactical vests like paper. "Backup servers!" Chloe shouted, her voice cutting through the roar of combat. "They're targeting the mainframe on the 3rd floor! Protect the data!" Rex's massive head swung toward her, his golden eyes locking onto hers. There was intelligence in that gaze, a flicker of recognition that went beyond animal instinct. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and launched himself through the shattered windows. Chloe scrambled to her feet, her tablet still transferring data, and ran to the doorway. The corridor beyond was chaos. Shattered cubicles, sparking wires, the bodies of rogue wolves littering the carpet. But through the smoke and flickering lights, she saw them. Rex's pack. They emerged from the shadows like wraiths, a dozen massive wolves in shades of black, gray, and russet. Their eyes glowed with the same fierce gold, their bodies coiled with lethal grace. They moved in perfect synchronization, their claws and fangs a blur of violence as they engaged the remaining mercenaries. One of the wolves, a massive black beast with a scar across his muzzle, barked a sharp command. The pack responded instantly, forming a protective ring around Chloe as she made her way toward the stairwell. "Move!" she shouted, her voice hoarse. "The 3rd floor! Now!" The pack surged forward, a wave of fur and fury that swept through the corridor like a tidal wave. Chloe followed close behind, her tablet clutched to her chest, her heels clicking against the blood-slicked floor. They reached the main server room on the 3rd floor just as Rex crashed through the ceiling. He'd taken the elevator shaft, his massive claws ripping through the metal panels, his body a missile of pure destruction. He landed in the center of the server racks, his silver-gray fur glistening with blood and sweat, his fangs bared in a snarl that shook the very foundations of the building. A dozen rogue wolves surrounded him, their weapons raised, their yellow eyes flickering with fear. They knew what they were facing. They knew the legend. And they knew they were already dead. Rex didn't wait for them to attack. He lunged, his massive body a blur of silver and rage. His claws tore through the nearest wolf, sending him flying into a server rack with enough force to dent the metal. His jaws closed around the throat of another, a single, brutal shake that ended the threat in an instant. The pack descended behind him, a coordinated assault that left no corner of the room untouched. Glass shattered. Metal screeched. The red emergency lights flickered in time with the violence, casting the scene in apocalyptic strobes. Chloe stood in the doorway, her tablet still transferring data, her gray eyes fixed on the chaos before her. She watched Rex tear through the mercenaries with a primal grace that was almost beautiful, his massive body a weapon of perfect precision. He moved like a dancer, each step calculated, each strike lethal. One of the rogue wolves broke from the pack, charging toward Chloe with a snarl. She didn't flinch. She simply stepped to the side, letting the wolf crash into the doorframe, and slammed her tablet against his skull with a sickening crack. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious. Rex's golden eyes found her across the room. There was a flicker of something in his gaze. Surprise, maybe, or approval. Then he turned back to the fight, his jaws closing around the last remaining mercenary's leg, dragging him across the floor and hurling him through a plate glass window. Silence fell. The red strobe lights continued to pulse, but the sound of combat had ceased. The floor was littered with the bodies of the rogue wolves, their tactical gear torn and bloody. The server racks hummed softly, undamaged, their data intact. Rex stood in the center of the room, his massive chest heaving, his silver-gray fur matted with blood and debris. His golden eyes swept across the carnage, then settled on Chloe. She was leaning against the doorframe, her tablet clutched to her chest, her crimson blazer splattered with blood that wasn't her own. Her dark lattice hair bun was slightly askew, a few strands escaping to frame her face. Her gold-rimmed glasses were still perfectly in place. "Data transfer complete," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. The mainframe is intact. Server backups are secure. Rex's massive form began to shift, his bones cracking and reforming, his fur receding to reveal skin and muscle. Within moments, he was standing before her, naked and battle-scarred, his chest heaving with exertion. The black suit was gone, reduced to tattered scraps. His amber eyes were still bright with the remnants of the blood moon, but the fury had faded, replaced by a quiet intensity. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough. Chloe shook her head. "A few scratches. Nothing serious." He stepped closer, his massive hand reaching out to cup her chin, tilting her face to the light. His eyes scanned her skin, searching for wounds, his thumb brushing across her cheek with surprising gentleness. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice low. "It's not mine," she replied, meeting his gaze. "The wolf who tried to grab me. He'll be walking with a limp for a while." Rex's lips twitched into a faint smile. "You defended yourself." "I defended my data," she corrected. The wolf was incidental. His smile widened, just a fraction, and he released her chin. He stepped back, his massive frame silhouetted against the shattered windows, the blood moon casting his features in harsh red relief. "Your pack," Chloe said, gesturing to the wolves now regrouping in the corridor. "They're loyal." "They're mine," Rex said simply. "They followed me here. They always will." Chloe nodded, her gray eyes assessing. "They're well-trained, effective. You should be proud." Rex tilted his head, studying her. "You're not afraid." "Should I be?" she asked, her tone genuinely curious. "Most people would be," he said. "After seeing what I am, what I can do." Chloe tucked her tablet under her arm and walked toward him, her heels clicking against the blood-slicked floor. She stopped a few feet away, looking up at him with that same cold, clinical assessment. "You did what needed to be done," she said. "You protected this company. You protected the data. You protected me." She paused, her gaze softening almost imperceptibly. "That's not something to fear. That's something to appreciate." Rex stared at her, his amber eyes searching hers. The blood moon cast its crimson light across her face, catching the gold rims of her glasses, the curve of her jaw. "Appreciate," he repeated, tasting the word. "Don't let it go to your head," she said, turning away. "You still have a performance review next week." He laughed, a low, genuine sound that rumbled through his chest. "Wouldn't dream of it." She paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder. "The cleanup crew is on their way. You should get dressed." "And Rex?" "Yes?" She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a small notepad, scribbling something with her gold pen. She tore the slip off and handed it to him. "Double bonus," she said, "for exceptional performance in a crisis situation. And I'm authorizing overtime pay for your pack. They were useful." Rex looked down at the note, his lips curving into a slow smile. She was rewriting the rules of his world, one slip of paper at a time. "I'll make sure they get it," he said. She nodded once, then walked out into the corridor, leaving him standing in the ruins of the server room, naked and battle-scarred, the blood moon still burning in the sky. He looked down at the note in his hand, Chloe's neat handwriting, crisp and precise. "Double bonus approved. Overtime authorized for pack. Don't make a habit of this. C. Vance." The AlphaKing of the Silver Crest laughed, a raw, unbridled sound that echoed through the shattered room. She was impossible, infuriating, and utterly, completely magnificent. He tucked the note into the pocket of his shredded trousers, his smile lingering. He was going to keep every single one of her notes, and one day he was going to earn the one that mattered most. The emergency lights had finally stopped their frantic pulsing, settling into a steady, dim red glow that cast long shadows across the wreckage of the executive lobby. The acrid smell of smoke, ozone, and blood hung thick in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of shattered glass and the faint, lingering scent of ozone from the shorted-out server backups. Debris littered the polished concrete floor. Torn cubicle walls, splintered conference tables, the twisted remains of a potted ficus that had seen better centuries. Chloe stood in the center of the carnage, her tablet clutched to her chest, her gray eyes scanning the damage with a clinical detachment that would have made a battlefield surgeon proud. Her crimson blazer was splattered with blood, not her own, and her dark lattice hair bun had finally surrendered, loose strands of dark hair framing her face. The gold-rimmed glasses were still perched on her nose, slightly askew, and she pushed them up with a fingertip as she surveyed the ruins. The silver-gray wolf stepped through the shattered doorway of what had once been the executive boardroom, his massive paws crunching against the broken glass. His fur was matted with blood and debris, his chest heaving with labored breaths. The blood moon still hung in the sky beyond the gaping hole in the ceiling, its crimson light casting his massive form in a halo of violence. He padded toward her, his claws clicking against the concrete, his golden eyes fixed on her face. He moved with a cautious, deliberate grace, as if approaching a wild animal that might startle at any moment. His muzzle was damp with blood, enemy blood, not his own, and a deep gash ran across his shoulder, still oozing. Chloe didn't move, didn't flinch. She simply watched him approach, her expression unreadable. The wolf stopped a few feet away, his massive head lowering until his bloody snout rested gently against her free hand. The contact was soft, almost reverent, and a low, rumbling whine escaped his throat, a sound that was equal parts apology and exhaustion. Then, his form began to shift. The cracking and popping of bones reforming filled the silence, the sound visceral and raw. His massive body contorted, shrinking, reshaping, fur receding to reveal the hard planes of muscle and skin beneath. Within moments, Rex was standing before her, completely naked, his battle-scarred body on full display. He was a mess. Deep scratches crisscrossed his chest and arms, some still weeping blood. A purple bruise was blooming across his ribs, and a thin cut ran along his jawline. His amber eyes were weary, shadowed with exhaustion, but they never left her face. He braced himself, waited for the screams, the accusations, the call to the police or the pack council, or whatever bureaucratic nightmare she would unleash upon him for revealing his true nature in such a violent, uncontrolled way. He'd destroyed her office, terrorized her employees, and slaughtered a dozen men in front of her. She'd have every right to fire him, to ban him from her empire forever. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough and hoarse. "I know this isn't. I didn't mean for you to see." Chloe stepped forward, her heels crunching against the broken glass, and walked past him. He blinked, confusion flickering across his exhausted face. She was heading toward the server racks, her tablet already raised, her thumb swiping across the screen. "The mainframe is intact," she said, her voice matter of fact. "All encrypted drives are secured. Backup protocols initiated successfully." She paused, tapping a few more commands. "Zero asset loss." Rex stared at her, utterly bewildered. There were bodies. I tore the ceiling apart." "3 million in office structural damage," Chloe said, cutting him off. She glanced up from her tablet, her gray eyes meeting his. "The boardroom ceiling will need to be replaced. The floor-to-ceiling windows on the executive floor are a total loss, and the conference table was imported from the Twilight Territories. That alone is going to set me back 6 figures." He opened his mouth, then closed it. She was cataloging the damage, like a property assessor. "But," she continued, her voice softening just slightly, "given your extraordinary physical security performance and unpaid overtime dedication." She reached into the pocket of her blazer and pulled out a folded document, crisp and fresh, as if she'd printed it just moments before the attack. She smoothed it out on the edge of a nearby desk, one of the few pieces of furniture still standing, and gestured for him to approach. "I am offering you a promotion," she said, her tone businesslike, but with a warmth he'd never heard before. Position: lifetime executive partner and CEO spouse. Full medical coverage included. Dental and vision, obviously. Stock options. A company car, though I'm not sure how well you'll fit in the standard models. Rex stepped closer, his eyes scanning the document. It was a contract, beautifully formatted, with his name at the top and Chloe's signature already waiting at the bottom. Spouse? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Spouse, she confirmed, her gray eyes fixed on his. Long-term strategic partnership. Indefinite duration. Mutual benefits. I've crunched the numbers, and your skill set, both corporate and extracurricular, represent a significant asset to my continued operations. And I've found that I prefer having you around. He stared at her, his amber eyes wide, his chest heaving. The battle scars seemed to fade into the background as he processed her words. She wasn't running. She wasn't screaming. She was offering him a contract. You're insane, he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only wonder. Possibly, she agreed. But I'm also pragmatic. You're loyal. You're capable. You're devastatingly effective in a crisis. She paused, her gaze softening. And you look at me like I'm the only person in the world who matters. I've never had that before. It's not unpleasant. Rex laughed, a deep, rich, obsessed laugh that echoed through the ruined lobby. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated joy, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. You are the most impossible woman I have ever met, he said, stepping closer. You rejected me because my PAC's balance sheet was a disaster. You fined me $50 for growling. You made me pour coffee and study for quizzes. His voice cracked, emotion bleeding through. And now you're proposing to me in the middle of a war zone, citing ROI and long-term strategic partnerships. Okay? I don't do anything without a detailed analysis, Chloe said, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. He closed the distance between them in a single stride, his massive hands cupping her face, tilting her chin up toward him. His amber eyes burned with a fierce, possessive intensity that made her breath catch. I love you, he said, the words raw and honest. I've loved you since the moment you handed me that rejection report. You broke me, Chloe. And then you rebuilt me, piece by piece, with your ridiculous rules and your impossible standards and your cold, brilliant, magnificent mind. She opened her mouth to respond, but he didn't give her the chance. He kissed her. It was a crushing, passionate kiss, the kind that stole breath and shattered composure. His lips were warm and demanding, his hands tangling in her loose hair, pulling her against his battered, scarred body. She melted into him, her tablet clattering to the floor, her fingers gripping his shoulders as if he were the only solid thing in a world of chaos. When they finally broke apart, gasping for air, he rested his forehead against hers, a low, rumbling growl of satisfaction vibrating through his chest. I accept, he said, the promotion, the partnership, all of it. Chloe pulled back, a genuine smile spreading across her face. Warm, unguarded, radiant. Good. I already had HR update your file. You're incredible, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I know, she replied, her gray eyes sparkling. Now put some clothes on. We have a press conference in 2 hours, and I need you to look presentable for the announcement. Rex laughed again, the sound filling the ruined lobby with warmth and hope. He pulled her into another kiss, gentler this time, savoring the feel of her lips against his. The red emergency lights flickered once, twice, then steadied, casting a warm glow over the wreckage. The blood moon was beginning to set beyond the shattered windows, its crimson light fading into the soft gray of approaching dawn. The AlphaKing of the Silver Crest, once the most feared predator in the realm, stood naked and battle-scarred in the ruins of his mate's empire, holding the woman who had broken him, rebuilt him, and claimed him as her own. And for the first time in his life, he had everything he'd ever wanted. Chloe bent down, retrieved her tablet from the floor, and dusted it off. She tapped a few commands, her professional composure slowly returning. "I'll draft the formal announcement," she said. "We'll frame it as a corporate merger, a strategic alliance between Apex Logistics and the Silvercrest Pack. Very lucrative, very." "Chloe," Rex interrupted, his voice gentle. She looked up, her gray eyes meeting his. "Just say it," he said. "Say you love me." She paused, her lips twitching. "That's not in the contract. I don't care about the contract." She stepped closer, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "I love you," she said, the words soft but certain. "You infuriating, magnificent, coffee-fetching, proposal-tearing, warehouse-lifting, server-protecting AlphaKing." He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his devastatingly handsome face into something almost boyish. "I love you too," he said. "Now let's go rebuild your empire." She laughed, the sound bright and genuine, and took his hand in hers. "Together," she said. "Together," he agreed. And they walked out of the ruined lobby, hand in hand, ready to face whatever the world threw at them, as partners, as equals, as each other's greatest investment. True partnership isn't forged by ancient decrees or forced submission, but by finding someone who respects your independence enough to stand beside you as an equal, proving that love is the ultimate long-term investment. If you enjoyed this unexpected journey and want to experience more thrilling mysteries and fierce romances, please subscribe to our channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you for listening.